Jack the Ripper, the mysterious serial killer whose identity has long remained a mystery.
That is.
Until now.
But first, there are thousands of unsolved cases in London, some dating back not just decades, but hundreds of years. The most famous of those, the Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, DNA from a shawl recovered at the scene of one of his crimes has incredibly found a 100% match.
137 years ago, a killer walked through the fog of Whitechapel and carved his name into history without ever speaking a word. Police hunted him. Experts argued over him. Millions feared him. But what if the name they all missed was sitting in their files the entire time? And what if modern science, using tools designed for ancient bones and lost civilizations, has finally cracked the one mystery no one ever thought would break? Tonight, the fog lifts, and the identity of Jack the Ripper may be far closer and far more disturbing than anyone expected. The fog over Whitechapel never really vanished. It lingers in old police notes, in cracked photographs, in the names of 5 women whose stories were swallowed by the dark. In 1888, this place was a maze of tight alleys and broken lamps, where shadows moved like they were alive. People walked with their heads down, hoping the night would ignore them. But one man used that fear as his shield. He knew the rhythm of these streets. He knew when a patrol passed and when the night fell silent. And he knew exactly how long he needed. 5 minutes, maybe 10, to slip behind someone and disappear with them into the dark. What he left behind was not just horror, it was confusion, panic, a city begging for answers. Still, every clue seemed to rot before the police could touch it. Every lead turned to smoke. Even today, experts argue over who he was. A doctor? A rich man? A foreigner? A madman? The list is long. The proof is thin. But one thing stayed hidden for more than a century. An object so ordinary that no one believed it could hold the truth. A shawl. And the stains on it may speak louder than any witness ever did. No one expected a piece of fabric to survive the chaos of 1888. Crime scenes were not protected. Evidence was not sealed. Crowds walked through blood before officers even arrived. Yet somehow, a long silk shawl, dark, patterned, and splashed with stains, made it out of Mitre Square and into the hands of a police officer who should never have taken it. For decades, it moved silently through one family, folded away, untouched by history, yet carrying its weight. Most believed it was nothing more than a myth, a story told by descendants who wanted to feel close to the unsolved case. After all, how could a shawl remain hidden while the world obsessed over Jack the Ripper? But then, scientists stepped in. When advanced DNA tools, normally used on ancient bones and mummies, were applied to the fabric, they pulled something shocking from those old fibers. Traces of blood, traces of something else, and both belonged to people whose names still echo through Ripper history. One match linked to a victim, the other to a suspect police once whispered about in private. The shawl wasn't just real. It was talking, and what it said would drag one forgotten man back into the light. Before the shawl became evidence, it was something else. Clothing worn by a woman fighting to survive the streets of Whitechapel. Her name was Catherine Eddowes, and on the night she died, she had just been released from a police cell. She'd been drunk, laughing, even singing. No one knew she had only 45 minutes left to live. Mitre Square was quiet when she walked in. Too quiet. The patrol officer passed through at 1:30 a.m. and saw nothing. When he returned at 1:44, everything had changed. Catherine lay on the cold ground, her throat cut, her face slashed, her body opened with disturbing precision. It was the kind of scene that shook even hardened officers. She was the only Ripper victim found within the tight patrol loop of a city police beat, meaning the killer worked fast, faster than anyone thought possible. Whoever he was, he knew what he was doing, and he knew exactly how long he had before the officer returned. The shawl at her side remained untouched by investigators. They didn't understand evidence the way we do now. They only understood fear. But fear couldn't explain the second DNA sample found on the fabric, one that didn't belong to Catherine, and one that pointed straight to a name buried deep in old police files. Long before DNA, long before documentaries and theories, the police already had a name. They didn't shout it in the newspapers. They whispered it in hallways, wrote it in margins, and hid it behind phrases like a certain low-class Polish Jew. His name was Aaron Kosminski, a young immigrant living only streets away from the murder sites. Kosminski was quiet, thin, sickly, not at all the monster people pictured. But the police watched him. They saw the way he talked to himself, the way he refused food because he thought people were poisoning him. They saw the anger, the fear, the strange hatred of women mentioned in their notes, and they grew suspicious. Then came the moment that could have ended everything. A witness was brought to identify him. The man looked into Kosminski's face and confirmed he was the killer, but he refused to testify. Not out of fear, out of loyalty. He would not betray another Jew, according to police records. With no witness, no confession, and no forensics, the case fell apart. Kosminski slipped away, not into the night, but into an asylum, where he would remain until he died in silence. The police believed they had their man, but without proof, history moved on. Until the shawl spoke. When scientists began testing the shawl, they used tools built for ancient remains, methods meant to pull DNA from bones thousands of years old. The fabric was fragile, its stains older than modern crime labs themselves. But as the samples were processed, something rare happened. The past began to answer back. The first DNA match connected directly to a known descendant of Catherine Eddowes. That alone was shocking. It meant the shawl wasn't a myth or a family story. It really had been at Mitre Square the night she died. But buried deeper in the fibers was something stranger, a second genetic trail. A mitochondrial DNA sequence matched to the maternal line of Aaron Kosminski. It wasn't perfect proof, not the kind that slams a courtroom door shut, but it was enough to shake the foundations of every old theory. After all, how could the DNA of a victim and a known police suspect end up on the same fabric, one taken from a murder scene? Critics argued contamination. Others doubted the shawl's history. But with each round of testing, the same two names kept rising from the fibers, like ghosts refusing to stay buried. If the evidence was real, then Kosminski wasn't just a suspect. He was inches from the victim the night she died. Long before DNA pointed towards Kosminski, the murders themselves whispered clues. The killer moved like he knew the streets better than anyone. He struck in the small cracks between police patrols, tiny windows of silence that lasted only minutes, and each attack showed more confidence, more control, and more skill. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. 5 women, 5 lives swallowed by the same dark force. Stride's murder was cut short, interrupted. Eddowes was killed less than an hour later, just blocks away. That timing puzzled detectives for years, but to someone who lived in Whitechapel, someone who walked the same alleys daily, slipping from one spot to the next would take minutes, not miles. Then there was the violence itself. Organs removed with speed, cuts made with purpose. The killer wasn't random. He wasn't stumbling through the dark.
He had a ritual, one that grew bolder with each attack, and then, as if a switch flipped, he stopped. That sudden silence always felt strange. But what if the murders ended because the killer was taken off the streets? Because months later, Aaron Kosminski was institutionalized.
And once he entered the asylum, the killings ceased forever. Years after the murders, a high-ranking investigator named Donald Swanson scribbled notes in the margins of a book written by his superior, Robert Anderson. These notes were never meant to be public, yet inside them was one of the most explosive claims in the entire case. Swanson wrote that the police did identify the killer. He said a witness did point him out. He said the suspect was a Polish Jew, and he said that man was later placed in an asylum, where he died. Every detail matched one person, Aaron Kosminski. These weren't rumors. These weren't theories whispered in pubs. These were words written by the man who oversaw the investigation itself. Still, the public never heard the truth. Without testimony, without hard evidence, the police had no case. And with time, the fear faded, London moved on, and the Ripper became a legend. But imagine knowing the truth and being unable to prove it. Imagine watching the world create wild theories, royalty, butchers, artists, while the real suspect lived quietly a few streets away, lost in his own mind. Swanson died with his secret. And for more than a century, the world kept searching for answers the police already believed they had. But the past wasn't done speaking. When the DNA findings hit the news, the world exploded with excitement. Headlines claimed the case was solved. People said the mystery was over. But science is rarely that simple, especially forensic science pulled from a 137-year-old piece of cloth. And almost as fast as the celebration began, the doubts took shape. Experts warned that mitochondrial DNA can't name one single person, only a maternal line. Critics said the Shaw's chain of custody was broken. Others argued that it could have been contaminated over the years, touched by collectors, relatives, even museum staff. Some claimed the entire Shaw story was too convenient, too cinematic, too perfect for a case that fed on legends. But then new experts stepped in. Textile analysts confirmed the dyes were from the right era. Forensic specialists said the blood patterns matched arterial spray, not something you'd expect from casual handling. And the biggest shock came when multiple rounds of testing kept pointing to the same two families, Eddowes and Kosminski. Doubt still hung in the air, but something had shifted. The science didn't close the case, but it refused to let it stay closed either. And in that space between proof and doubt, something far more unsettling began to grow. For decades, every new theory about Jack the Ripper fell apart the moment someone asked for hard proof. A prince, a painter, a surgeon, a sailor. Each name made headlines, but none survived real scrutiny. The story became less about truth and more about the thrill of guessing. But then, something strange happened. The old police notes, the witness who refused to testify, the asylum records, the sudden stop in the killings, the DNA from the shawl. For the first time in over a century, all the pieces pointed in the same direction. Kosminski lived in the center of the murder zone. He fit the timing, the geography, the behavior. He matched the profile laid out by investigators long before profiling even existed. He was identified by a witness who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And when he was removed from the streets, the murders ended instantly. It wasn't one clue that made the case feel different. It was the way they fit together, almost too cleanly, like a puzzle that had been waiting for someone to pick up the last missing piece. But if the evidence was so convincing, one question still lingered. Why wasn't the truth accepted sooner? Maybe the truth wasn't accepted because the world didn't really want it. A solved mystery loses its power. An answered question stops echoing. Jack the Ripper wasn't just a killer. He became a legend, a ghost. People could shape into anything they feared. A doctor, a madman, a stranger in the dark. The idea of him grew bigger than the man ever was. But when you strip away the myths, the clues don't point to a monster hiding in high society. They point to someone far simpler, someone forgotten, someone the police already suspected. Aaron Kosminski. His life didn't end with a dramatic chase or a final confession. It ended in an asylum, quiet and overlooked, his mind slipping further from reality. No diary, no deathbed secret, just empty hallways and fading records. And maybe that's why the world resisted the answer, because sometimes the truth isn't grand. Sometimes it's small, uncomfortable, and nothing like the legend we built. But even now, with science narrowing the path and history circling one name, the fog doesn't lift all the way. Not yet, because one question still hangs over Whitechapel. If Kosminski was the Ripper, then what else did the police keep hidden, and what other secrets are still waiting in the dark?